Good morning. We're now at week 2 for the book of Esther for such a time as this. Um, I really am enjoying studying Esther and seeing how the book unfolds and how the characters are intertwined and how they all lead us to, ultimately, they'll lead us to Jesus Christ. For the review, last week we looked at the time period, the setting, the author, and the characters of the book of Esther. So just a quick review. The time was 464 to 435 BC. The place was ancient Persia, Susa, which is modern Iraq. The author, we don't know exactly who the author is. There were 3 possibilities. Totally unknown. Could be Ezra or Mordecai, or it could be an unknown scribe in the court of Xerxes. And then we have those characters. King Xerxes, Queen Vashti, Mimican, Mordecai, Haggai, Haman, and Esther. And last week you might remember that we said Mimican and Haman possibly are the same person. So we went with one set of characteristics for them. We're going to just jump into a little bit more information about the book of Esther, a little more background. Esther is part of God's story, which ultimately leads us to the revelation of Jesus Christ, God incarnate. Esther is part of the history books of the Bible, and they help reveal God's plan. So all the way from the Old Testament, all those books in the Old Testament, the New Testament, it's all a part of God's plan. It's all important. Everything weaves together to create an ultimate plan and purpose that is ultimately fulfilled in the person of Jesus Christ. So, the purpose of the book of Esther is to demonstrate the providence of God. I mentioned to you last week that God is not mentioned in the book of Esther. And one thing that we know from that is the book of Esther has God working behind the scenes, and what is in the forefront is the human action that he is controlling in the background. God is always in control. We have to remember that. So what's happening in this book, he is in control of, even if he's not mentioned, if he's not directly referenced. So when we think about the providence of God, in the Latin, vedere means to see before. So we know that God sees everything. We know that he sees the past, the present, the future. He's been a part of the past, the present, the future. There's nothing that happens that he doesn't see. So he sees what's going on, and he divinely intervenes in the affairs of mankind. He's always intervening in our affairs. God might be out of our sight, but we are never out of his. And that can be a very comforting thing to remember. There's a couple scripture references. One is found in Psalm 121:4. Behold, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The other one is John 5:17, a New Testament reference. My Father is always at his work to this very day, and I too am working. So our earthly life is filled with heavenly guidance. There was a song written many years ago, and it was written by A.J. Sims, and it's called The Unseen Hand. And the lyrics go like this: there is an unseen hand to me that leads through ways I cannot see. While going through this world of woe, this hand still leads me as I go. I'm trusting to the unseen hand that guides me through this weary land. And some sweet day I'll reach that strand, still guided by that unseen hand. So it's just important to remember that just because we don't always see God working does not mean that he's not working. It doesn't mean that he's not in control. It doesn't mean that he is silent. We just don't always see everything the way we think we should see it. Trusting God when we can't see him working is called faith. That's where our faith comes in. But he is always working on our behalf. So there are places in the Bible where we can see God working in miraculous ways. For instance, a few examples. God met Moses at the burning bush. That was clearly evident that he was there. He parted the Red Sea for the Israelites. That was a miraculous event. He was showing his hand that he was there. He parted the Jordan Sea for Joshua, another miraculous event. And then, of course, the incarnation, appearing in a manger. And then a New Testament example, turning the water into wine at the wedding of Cana. He was there. He was showing his miraculous power. So in the book of Esther, God is working in the background. And a lot of theologians say that he's working in the background in this book, and this book was so important that it was included in the canon of scriptures because we as people need to understand how important our human actions are, how important it is for us to follow the guidance, the heavenly guidance of God. Theologian J.S. Baxter said, God is in the book of Esther, not in syllables, but in events, not in miraculous intervention, but as the guiding wheels of providence, not in open communication, but as the unseen power over all. And we talked last week that a quiet God is not an absent God. So God is always with us. We don't even have to wonder. He's right here, right now. In the book of Esther, God orders non-miraculous events to accomplish his purpose. There was nothing particularly miraculous about the events of Esther because it all had to do with human action. It all had to do with somebody saying yes at the right time. Remember last week in the little video we watched, the angel told the person involved that there was a little secret that at one point or another, everyone is the person that is called for a purpose, but they have to be willing to say yes. And we will see throughout this book that Esther said yes. Mordecai followed what God was leading him to do. And it's really interesting. When we look at chapter 1, Queen Vashti displeases the king and she is dethroned. That is a big deal. To displease the king during that time was a huge deal. Xerxes was having this huge party and he wanted to show off his beautiful wife. We talked last week about one of his characteristics was that he was proud. And he was very proud and he was boastful about his beautiful wife. And he asked her to come to the party and dance for the people, to come and so they could see her and to wear her crown. And theologians and Jewish tradition say that what he was asking her to do was come to the party wearing only her crown. And she did not want to do that. She did not want to leave the party that she was at. She did not want to follow her husband's orders, so she refused. And by refusing, she was putting King Xerxes in a very bad spot because there were certain things that had to happen when someone refused the king. And he became very angry and he just had these people in his ear on this side, and they were saying, if we allow this to go on, not only is Queen Vashti going to be undermining what you say, but all of the wives of all of the leaders of all of the people in the province are going to do their own thing and think they can get away with it. So the king ultimately said that Vashti could never be in the presence of the king again. She would no longer be queen, and he would find a new queen. So as the search for a queen begins, it's a big deal. This is not just some little beauty pageant. This is the ultimate beauty pageant. So different people in the town, in the city, in the area, they would bring young virgins, and they would be placed under the care of the eunuch Haggai. And that is how Esther was placed under the care of the eunuch Haggai. Mordecai thought that Esther would be a great candidate, so he put her before Haggai. And as God's plan is unfolding, another human action happens. Esther immediately finds favor with Haggai. We don't know exactly why she found this favor. Ultimately, we know that God is still in control, so there's that. But she finds this favor with Haggai, that Haggai gives her special food. He gives her special beauty treatments. He does all these different things. He moves her from this part of the harem to the most special part of the harem. And then these ladies that are all in this waiting room, kind of like waiting to have their night with the king, they receive 12 months of beauty treatments. So this was not just putting on a little oil of Olay, a little white shoulders, and a little CoverGirl, Maybelline if that's your choice. This was big deal. This was a big deal. 6 months of oil and myrrh, and then 6 months of perfumes. And then they would each take their turn with the king. And we're going to stop at that particular point. So we're getting ready to be in the middle of chapter 2 when Esther is made queen. And we'll see what transpires as we go through the book, and we'll learn some lessons next week that we can gain from studying Esther. But it's just really interesting how something so simple as finding favor with this eunuch is going to play a major part in the story. Our scripture verse again this week is Esther 4:14. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. This verse is really important because Mordecai is giving this information to Esther, and he's showing something in this verse. He says, for if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. He doesn't say relief and deliverance for the Jews will never come. He doesn't say relief and deliverance for the Jews will possibly come or possibly arise from another place. He says it will arise from another place. And what he's doing is he's just giving us this thing that he has faith. He's giving us the reminder that he has faith in the promises that God has said. Because God has said Israel will be saved. And what they're trying to do, as we'll see in the next few chapters, is destroy Israel and the Jewish people. So we're going to see how that plays out in the next few chapters, and we'll learn some insights, and we'll just look at some lessons that we can learn from the life of Esther. And until next week, have a great week.